Now, I wanted to tell you today about a fantastic film that's just been, it's going to be released in New Zealand on May the 30th, made from the same people who made I Can Only Imagine and Jesus Revolution. It is called Unsung Hero. You might have heard about it. We've been giving some tickets away to the New Zealand premiere next week. Now, the story follows an Australian family, the Smallbones. Back in the 90s, Dad David was a music promoter in Australia. They fell on hard times financially, and along with his wife Helen, and at that time, there's 6 children. They had a 7th child in America, and they moved to America to start all over again. As the story goes, subsequently launched massive music careers of some of their children in For King and Country and Rebecca St. James, both Grammy Award-winning artists. And Mum Helen Smallbone now joins me on the show today. Morena, good morning, Helen.
Thank you for having me, Lizzie.
Now, first of all, I was at the CMAA conference last year and that special preview screening of the film with yourself and David. Really enjoyed it. I watched the trailer again last night, and I just had that total feel-good feeling again. But what's it like for you, Helen, to see your family and your amazing story up on the big screen and somebody playing you?
Well, it's very surreal and also very crazy. I can't really put words sometimes to the emotions. It's really funny, Lizzie, because David, I think, has seen the movie about 20 times. I've kept it down to about 5, maybe. I said to him, I actually find it a little hard to watch. And not because it's not, I think they've done a brilliant job. I think it's really well done. I wouldn't change anything. I think the emotions, it must evoke in me the emotions of our years when this actually happened to us in the early 90s.
Sure.
And I must find it just a little hard. And so anyway, I'll be watching it a few more times. I think I'm going to the premiere in New Zealand, and then I think a couple in Sydney as well, in Australia as well. So I've got a few more up my sleeve, and it's if anybody had said, 1, that we lived this life, and then 2, that they would make a movie of it, I would have just been, come on, no, never.
You're pulling my leg.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was there any parts of the film that you thought, oh, I wish you didn't put that in there? I mean, you don't need to name them, but, did you ever get that feeling like, nah?
There is probably one of the more dramatic scenes in the movie is Helen, losing her temper at David when he's speaking very aggressively to Rebecca, and she actually slaps him. And I think it's really appropriate, and they asked my permission if they could include that.
Yeah.
But David would never have, particularly in those early days with a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old who's so vulnerable, would ever have spoken to her like that. That's probably one of the hardest scenes to watch. I think the other is probably Helen's vulnerability when we get on the plane, not knowing what's going to happen, like not knowing, leaving Australia, and not knowing what the future's going to hold. And I see her bewilderment, I see her concern, I see her being overwhelmed. And I think that's a pretty hard scene for me to watch as well.
Yeah. Is that because that is how you felt?
I think so. It's 32 years ago. It's probably a little hard for me to remember. I was very glad we were doing it together. I was very glad that we had each other and that we were a larger family, because that gave us greater community.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it was probably what I was feeling at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And just think of you leaving your family, leaving your friends, going to another country, okay, English speaking, right, but a different culture.
Yeah.
Something that I've read that you said about that you chose to live outside the American cultural norms and lean into God. What did that look like for you and your family, Helen?
Well, when we first got settled into our rental home in Nashville, we had no furniture. We had very minimal money for food. And we just, I suppose, made the best of it. But we knew we didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. So we would gather around on the floor in our living room and we would pray. And I think when you face a really hard time, it shows you what the foundation of your life has been built on. And I'm very thankful to God that through that time, both David and I had a foundation of faith that we could rely on. We knew God was with us. We knew God was going to take care of us. We didn't know what that was going to look like and where it was going to come from. But we were looking for the hand of God actively each day and seeking his will and his direction. And frankly, he's been faithful. He's been good and he's been faithful.
Yeah, because, I mean, you left from Australia to America, but it wasn't like, from what I remember of the film, there wasn't like there was a job offer on the table, was there? You were taking a leap of faith, so to speak?
Well, we did actually have a job. David that was one nice thing. David said he was not prepared to bring his family to America without the job.
Okay.
So he came over to America mid-year, probably about June 1991, found a job. And so we left in August 91 to fulfill that job. So we did have hope. We did come with that level of hope. However, 2 months after we got here, he lost that job. And that was when we were really, really thrown into the deep end. And we were really struggling on how we were going to survive.
Yeah.
God, in his faithfulness, allowed him before the end of the year, I think it was in November, a couple of months later, maybe it was even later than that. I don't remember the timeline, but he did pick up another job managing a young Christian artist here in America. It wasn't as much money as the first job, but it did manage to put food on the, pay our rent and basic bills. And then we physically worked to put food on the table.
Yeah. Now, that's depicted in the film. There was some physicality of mowing lawns and stuff.
That's correct.
That's correct? The family got out there and
so when we first came and we got settled into the home, it was like getting into October, and the leaves were starting to fall. And so we were looking for, I don't know, we're probably pretty bored, to tell you the truth. We didn't know anyone. We didn't have much to do.
Yeah.
And so we borrowed some rakes from the neighbor, and then we went and started raking our front lawn. And that's when God opened the opportunity for us to be able to work in the community, because people would see us out there and we would have looked pretty funny, because 6 kids, me very pregnant with number 7,
yes,
out the front raking leaves. And they would stop and they'd be like, do you want to come down and rake our lawn? And so we would walk down to their lawn, rake their lawn. And so then the next neighbor, and so when we realized, we started then making friends, people started learning why we were here, and jobs, we were then started cleaning houses. Rebecca was babysitting. We were gardening. Once summer came, someone gave us some mowers and we would mow lawns. So it really was very hands-on, very down to earth and practical. And we were all working together. It was every hand on deck.
Yeah. And is that what the story of the film is really about? You and your family working together and building a new life?
I think so, yeah. I think that's part of the core of it. And then once Rebecca got signed, when she had to start touring, we worked for the previous 2 or 3 years together. And so David and Rebecca were like, well, we can't bear to be apart from one another. So then we started traveling together, and David recognized that the boys, instead of raking lawns and mowing lawns, we could have them be the crew. And so they started setting up the stage management, and Daniel, our eldest son, learned how to set up the lights, and they became her crew.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I mean, you've got to turn that into a movie, right?
Well, the really wonderful part, and that's God doesn't waste anything in our lives, because when we started working together, doing those menial tasks, our priority for doing it was to put food on the table, to get money to buy food.
Yeah.
But God used that to teach us how to work together, teach us a good work ethic, that everyone mattered, that everybody had a job, that no one was better than the other, that we all needed to contribute. Then they carried that into supporting Rebecca. They learned their skills of how to put on a good concert. Daniel grew in his lighting designs. He grew in his understanding of how to program lights. And he still, to this day, is working for King Country. He does all their stage design. He does all their programming of their lights. And then our youngest son, Josh, who was very tiny when Rebecca started, actually manages for King Country. Ben, the middle son, the next son down from Daniel, he does a lot of the boys' music videos and has worked very closely with the boys over the past few years. He's more ventured out onto his own. He's directing films. But the core of working together that we learned in those early days has not been wasted, and they're still doing it today.
That's so beautiful. And I did want to hear about your other children, actually, because obviously some of them have won Grammy Awards and some of them are doing other amazing things. So thanks for sharing that. Something that I heard you say, Helen, was as a mum, to see the kids being blessed is another element of God I didn't expect. Can you tell me about that?
I thought, I don't know, I've seen him. Actually, I'll go back. When Rebecca was doing her, I think it's her 4th album, it was called the Transform album. We were meant to tour for 13 months. And as a homeschooling mum, I was like, what on earth am I going to do? 13 months. I mean, that's a full school year plus.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what that school year was going to look like. What was my expectations of completed schoolwork? I certainly didn't want to be sitting there marking schoolwork or, teaching subjects when we had a day off. And if I didn't want to do it, then undoubtedly kids didn't want to do it. And so I really had to sit back and think, oh my goodness, are the kids when they grow up going to be sit back and think, Mom, you really screwed up our lives. I mean, we've now got to go and back to school. We've got to learn this. We've got to learn that. We haven't even, I just was thinking they're going to blame me for messing up their life. So I went to God and I said, God, you see what's happening here. What's my expectation for this year for them schoolwork wise? What am I meant to teach them? And I had this quiet assurance that he spoke to me. And the words that he spoke to me were, I'll teach them what they need to know.
Oh.
And I tell you,
that's great.
I relied on that as a mum, as a homeschooling mum, because we lived such an alternative life that I had no idea what their future was going to be. But I've seen him be faithful. I can look at each of them now, and they have learned skills that he taught them on our journey together of being faithful in serving him, and he has blessed them into their own careers. And that's what I suppose, it's just it overwhelms me to think that on this journey where they did not have control over their lives, they were just being part of the family, that God has blessed each of them individually.
That's beautiful. So Helen, it's almost Mother's Day here in New Zealand, and I was just thinking about you. You've got 7 children. I think you've got something like a rugby-sized team of grandchildren, isn't it? Like 15 or something like that.
15 and a half.
15 and a half. Okay. Do you guys, I don't know where you live in proximity to each other. Do you manage to all get together that often, Mother's Day or other special days?
Well, we do prize time to being together, but with people's schedules, it often is hard.
Yeah.
And when we finally did actually purchase a home here in America, we purchased an old farmhouse that has all individual rooms. So when you get 30 of us together, It really doesn't work. So I got to rely on other people to host us as together. But God has been, again, so good. We are in the process, David and I, of building what I deem as being a retirement home. However, it's not necessarily a downsize in size because of our large family, but it will be able to allow me to host family functions again. And so that should be completed probably in about August, September. And I'm really looking forward to be able to having more family times where we can celebrate together. Yeah. Mother's Day for me this year is going to be a little different, and it will not be a day of celebration because we are flying down to New Zealand.
Oh, awesome.
David and I hop on a plane.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to having you here with us next week. I know you're going to be at that premiere in Auckland, and And we look forward to having the boys here next week too for King and Country. I'm going to be at the Auckland concert, so I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
Helen Smallbone, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless you.
God bless. Hey, thanks for joining us today. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you can catch all our interviews on Star. See you next time.